Greetings to you all. My name is Benjamin Ferenz, and I'm speaking to you from Delray Beach, Florida in October 2017. I want to convey my appreciation to Professor Laurie Blank for the invitation, and Professor Heinz, who's from the Leiden University, as well as the students of Emory Law School who are studying international humanitarian law. I will try in the course of a few minutes to give you a brief summary of my own experience with the issues before you. My parents fled from Romania and Hungary when I was an infant. They were fleeing from persecution and poverty. We came to the United States on an open deck in December 1921. We arrived in the United States, no job, no money, no language, and we were glad when my father was able to get permission to have his family sleep in the basement, in the cellar of a house in Hell's Kitchen in New York, if he would be the janitor. I went to some special schools in New York which were intended for gifted boys. That got me into a free college, City College. From there, I went on to the Harvard Law School. While I was still a student, war broke out. The Japanese attacked the United States by surprise at Pearl Harbor. Everybody I knew volunteered to go into the military service. I did the same. I sent a letter to the FBI, which was then responsible for that, and offered to be dropped as a spy behind the German lines in occupied France. They replied saying no, I had not been a citizen long enough. My parents had gotten their citizenship as soon as they could read, I suppose, and but it was only 14 years before then, and the rules required 15 years. So I was rejected for what I thought would be the most useful thing I could do for my country. I entered the Army as a private in the artillery. Of course, I knew nothing about artillery. I was assigned as a typist. I knew nothing about typing. However, in due course, we landed on the beaches of Normandy. I joined in the fighting all across France, through the Maginot Line, the Siegfried Line, all the other lines. And toward the end of the war, I suddenly received a strange notice. I was then a corporal in the artillery, saying I had been directed to go to General Patton's headquarters, and my name had been forwarded from Washington. I had done research as a law student for a professor, Sheldon Gluck, who wrote one of several books on war crimes, and I was ordered to report to the judge advocate section. The judge advocate, a colonel there, said, your name has been forwarded from Washington. We are ordered to set up a war crimes branch. What's a war crime? So they had no idea whatsoever. And I believe that I was the first American soldier to deal with war crimes in the field. Anyway, that duty took me then, when we got reports of people coming out of, looked like work camps, and they looked like they were starving. I would jump into my Jeep and race to the scene. The first such work camp was Buchenwald, concentration camp. We didn't know the word concentration camp. There, of course, I saw the horrors, which are quite indescribable. Since you are law students dealing with humanitarian rights, I'll just give you a brief indication. People lying on the ground, you couldn't tell if they were dead or alive. Only their eyes were pleading for help. The crematoria still going. Bodies stacked outside, looking like piles of bones, waiting to be burned. The stench, of course, was horrible. Disease was rampant, everything in the camp, rats running around, lice, malaria, typhus, dysentery. My object was to get in and get the evidence of the crimes and get out of there as fast as possible, which I did. the way I did it, I would proceed right to the Schreibstube, the office. I would go find the commanding officer and see, I'm here on orders of General Patton, acting on instructions from the President of the United States to set up war crimes tribunals. I've got to immediately have 10 men around the office. Nobody goes in or out without my permission. And they would say, yes, sir. And immediately I had 10 soldiers surrounding it. And I would go there, find the Schreiber, the man who was responsible, always an inmate for it, tell him I needed the records and so on, and seize the important records, the Totenbücher, the registry of the people killed, and the reason for death, and these were all fake. They would say typhoid, 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 auf der Flucht erschossen, which means killed while trying to escape, killed while trying to escape, killed while trying to escape. Pages and pages and pages of the same dreary lies. They died because they were starved to death and beaten to death. It was total chaos in the camps. The SS trying to flee, the inmates trying to catch them and beat them, sometimes putting them in the furnace and burning them slowly. I witnessed that. And the type of human existence there, so inhumane. I saw starving men piling in the piles of rubble, garbage, digging like rats in garbage to find a bite of something to eat, something they could get some nourishment from. So when human beings turned to animals, they looked like animals. And so these events, and I repeated them in several camps. I'd move on to the next camp, Mauthausen, Flossenburg, a whole row of camps, Ebensee. It's always basically the same. And I would collect the evidence of the crimes, the documentation, take some testimony from some of the prisoners who were still able to give testimony, and then use that as the basis for trials, which took place in the Dachau concentration camp itself. After it was liberated, of course. And these trials were Army military commission trials, about which very little is known. But these were military commissions where we took the guards and the officers who had been captured in these various camps and put them on trial in a room, large room, which had the seats on long benches, one like in watching a ball game, and everyone had a large number on him. Usually it was just one judge and 3 people on the bench. They would call the accused, Herr Schmidt, stand up. You have been accused of brutalities in the concentration camp of Buchenwald, where inmates were being beaten and starved to death, and you were a party to all of those crimes. What do you have to say for yourself? I wasn't there. I didn't do it. I was only the cook. I was only passing by. I was just carrying out orders. Everybody was well treated. A whole pack of obviously standard lies. The 3 U.S. military officers would say, all right, you are sentenced to death by hanging. Sit down. Next. The whole trial lasted 2 or 3 minutes. And they were sent to Landsberg prison, which is in Bavaria. Several years later, I was visiting Landsberg, and I went to see the German who was not then in charge. It was after the war. And I said, how many prisoners from the Dachau military trials were executed here? He said about 1,000. But these are trials were the original, before the International Military Tribunal began at Nuremberg, which received, of course, world renown. By the time that trial began, I was on my way home, and Bing Crosby said I'd be home by Christmas, and I told my fiancée, my girlfriend, who had been waiting patiently for about 10 years. We had met in New York, and she was also a refugee from persecution in Europe. So sure enough, I had to go as a stowaway at a military troop transport, but I got home for Christmas, and the day after Christmas, I was honorably discharged as a sergeant of infantry and awarded 5 battle stars for not having been killed in all of the major battles of the war. However, my career in the Army, I thought, came to a sudden and a thankful end when I received a telegram from the Pentagon. Dear sir, they wanted me to go back. The Nuremberg trial was already on, and the United States had decided to have subsequent proceedings, as they called them, additional trials. They planned 12 such trials in order to give the public a broader scope of why and how it would be possible for a civilized country like Germany to allow such crimes to take place. And so they wanted these 12 trials to try the doctors who performed medical experiments, the lawyers who perverted the law, the military who carried out the crimes, the SS, the industrialists who built the concentration camps for free labor. All of those were going to be presented in these subsequent proceedings. And the head of that was to be General Telford Taylor. Telford Taylor was also a Harvard Law graduate, very fine man. We became law partners in New York after these trials were over. And they wanted me to go back for that. And Taylor said, look, you're an experienced researcher finding it. We have 12 trials set up. We have the suspects, but we don't have the evidence. I went off to Berlin, where the offices were for the Third Reich, set up a staff of about 50 people, began going through all the archives, still intact, which had not been bombed out. Most of it had been bombed. And one of my researchers came and he gave me something called, in German, Reports from the Eastern Front. I opened it up, and it was daily reports from the German special unit called Einsatzgruppen. These were special units whose assignment was to follow behind the German lines and kill, without pity or remorse, every single Jewish man, woman, and child they could lay their hands on, and do the same to the gypsies and other presumed enemies of the Reich. When I found over 1 million killed, I took a sample, flew down from Berlin to Nuremberg. I said, General Taylor, we have to put on another trial. He said, we can't. The budget has been set. The trials are already going. I said, you can't let these mass murderers go free. I have in my hand proof of mass murder on a scale never before witnessed in human history. I'm not going to let these guys off the hook. He said, can you do it in addition to your other duties? I said, of course. And so it came to pass that Benjamin B. Ferenz, then age 27, was assigned the biggest murder trial in human history. I don't think I'd ever been in a criminal courtroom before. I had no experience whatsoever. And we came to trial. I prepared the opening statement, which has been filmed. Before the camera could start grinding, I had already said the first 2 sentences or so. It's been printed 1,000 times without the opening statements. And I said, it is with sorrow and with hope that we here disclose the deliberate slaughter of more than 1 million innocent and defenseless men, women, and children. Sorrow and hope were the 2 principal words guided me in that trial and in everything I've done since that time. Vengeance, I said, is not our goal. This is a plea of humanity to law. We will prove that the people who were murdered were killed because they didn't share the race, the religion, or the ideology of their executioners. And I thought that was a horrible thing, and I still do, and I always did. And I asked the court to affirm by international criminal law the right of all people to live in peace and dignity, regardless of their race or creed. And that was the effect of that judgment. They were all convicted, 13 were sentenced to death. What lessons have we learned from Nuremberg? What are our expectations? What are our hopes? That's the purpose of your meeting today. The Nuremberg trial, where Justice Jackson represented the United States very effectively, held that the important points were that crimes are committed by individuals. They're not committed by amorphous assignments or groups or countries. They're committed by individuals who should be held individually accountable. Aggression was labeled by the court as the supreme international crime because it included all the other crimes. And I can tell you from my own experience as a soldier, the question was raised why we didn't punish rape as one of the listed crimes in the international military trial or any of the others. There has never been a war without rape. There never will be a war without rape. And those of you who are concerned, as I am, with trying to prevent that horrible crime should bear that in mind. They are linked together. I spent the rest of my life trying to prevent war. And I wrote many books. I studied everything. I went to all the meetings everywhere. And all of my books, incidentally, are available free of charge on my website. Anything there can be copied by anyone. Take it and use it for the cause of world peace. So I spent my life trying to create an international criminal court. And as a tribute, I suppose, as a mark of recognition or appreciation, when they finally had the court set up in The Hague, its first court, permanent court since Nuremberg, the chief prosecutor, Moreno Ocampo of Argentina, asked me if I would do the closing remarks for the prosecution in closing their first case. I was then 92 years old. Is it important? Of course it's important. It's more important than it's ever been, because our capacity to kill has grown exponentially. We now have the capacity not only to kill people through nuclear bombings, but we also have cyberspace. We can cut off the electrical grid. I've just had a hurricane here in Florida when all the lights and all the water went out, and it was a big panic. Imagine what would happen if they killed the lights and your city, wherever you came from, or your whole country, or your whole planet, which they can do today. The principle of Nuremberg is the law has to be flexible. There has to be individual responsibility. It must meet the needs of the society it's designed to protect. Instead, they keep talking. They haven't defined aggression yet. Why haven't they defined aggression for 70 years? All inspired by the United States opposition. Now, why is the United States opposed? Well, the United States believes we are the greatest, we are the most powerful, we don't have to take instructions from anybody else, we are good and noble, and we have to have the power to exercise it independently. It was defined by Jackson, it was defined by the International Law Commission. In 2014, we had a consensus definition of aggression. It was a lousy definition, but with a lot of loopholes put in, of course, but it was there. But they said the court doesn't have jurisdiction to act on it. So it doesn't have that, and they're working on that right now. I don't know how many centuries they're going to work on that. What can I tell you? I have to keep repeating the message. If you wanted to get in, we have to change the hearts and minds of the public like you. I've given up on getting a majority of the politicians and the diplomats being able to do what I think would be the humane and proper thing to do. But it'll be up to the young people to say, as they did in the Vietnam War in the United States, hell no, Mr. President, we won't go, you go. And he went. So we have a similar situation. Let me just add one small point to bring you up to date. My lead defendant was a gentleman by the name of Otto Ohlendorf. Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, mind you, general in the SS. He acknowledged that the unit under his direct command killed 90,000 Jews. There was some doubt, he said, because very often the commanders in the field exaggerated the body count. They were proud of how many they killed. They made it even more so, but about 90,000. And he argued in his defense, supported by all kinds of legal opinions from German experts, that it was done in self-defense. I said, where do you come off with self-defense? Germany attacks France, Belgium, Holland, everybody else. And you argued self-defense? He says, yes, because we knew, Hitler told us, and he had better information, that the Russians were preparing to attack us. And therefore, in order to avert that, we exercise our legal right of self-defense by preempting that. So if we hear from some of our politicians that if a country dares to threaten us, we will destroy them, or do you go to the Nuremberg principle, find the person responsible and hold him accountable in a court of law and see whether he's right or wrong? So it's up to you, kids. My simple slogan is law, not war. If we could do that, we would save billions of dollars every day to take care of the needs of the children, pay for their education, the aged who are looking for a home, the refugees, would take care of all the problems which today cause the terrorism which we are trying to combat. If a person is willing to kill and die for his particular cause, you can't stop him because he feels it's unjust. And that's the world in which you live. So I come to the slogan, law, not war. But say, Mr. Ferenz, how do you do it? I'll tell you how to do it. You have to change the way people think, their hearts and minds. How do you do that? I have 3 rules. 1, never give up. 2, never give up. 3, I hear you talking. I hear you say never give up. Remember your promise. Your life may depend on it. Good luck to you all. Thank you.